Well, firstly, thank you all so much for finding the time to join our webinar. We're thrilled to have you. We're really going to focus on transforming your pipeline in 30 minutes. Now, the cynics in you may think, is that possible? Now, the realist in me says 30 minutes is quite an ask, but what you will have is some real tools to evaluate what you're doing and perhaps see some gaps in your approach. And ultimately, you'll hopefully have some tools to really see how to build that strategic marketing that drives results. Absolutely thrilled to be joined by Fiona O'Hara. We've known each other for more years than we probably would like to admit to. Fiona is a seasoned marketing director, having worked across some brands you may have heard of, such as Gartner and Google, and more recently for a global SaaS business, where we had the pleasure of working together on a really innovative turnaround campaign to really transform that business's pipeline. And I'm really pleased that Fiona is going to share some of that story a bit later on. So the point of today is really to think about what's worked over the last 10 years of running Nutcracker and really think about the companies where we have transformed their pipeline to something that's really solid and strategic, and try and put that into a strategy which can be picked up and used by multiple businesses regardless of sector. And what we've done is we've put that into 3 core strands that I'm going to talk you through now. So getting started, the first strand is really looking at attract. Now, this is really being seen and being heard. It's not about just having your brand glanced at. This is where you have to really understand your customers. A lot of companies think they know their customers, but they make assumptions. You need to really think about their pain points, their frustrations. What are their barriers? How are they feeling? What are they up against? Who are their stakeholders and what their stakeholders need to know? That level of deep dive into your customers is absolutely critical, and even more so now than ever. And in fact, 80% of customers say they're more likely to purchase from brands that provide that personalized experience. And that makes sense. You want to buy from people that you feel really understand you. And that's backed up by 60% of decision makers saying they ignore content that doesn't address their specific needs. Now, if you think about that, it makes sense. You don't really want to buy from somebody who don't think understands you, who doesn't really get you. So that trust is absolutely critical. And at this stage, this is where you really need to think about that empathy, really building that emotional connection with your customers. It's so effective. And actually, if we start to look at some tips for success, this is where you need to really drill down into who you want to sell to. Now, if that's a B2B, if you're joining us from a B2B sector, that can be something you make assumptions on. You may say, well, it's financial services or it's retail, but actually it's who within that, what size businesses, what are their focus points, who are they selling to? Really building up that picture of your customers is going to make your content so much more relevant and make them feel really understood. And that makes your audiences feel like you're really speaking directly to them, which goes back into that stat on the previous slide. But it's not just about making them feel seen and heard. It's about really being where they are. And that's where that research really needs to take place. And again, not making assumptions. Posting a couple of times on LinkedIn does not make a campaign. Really thinking about what industry events they're involved in, what type of publications they're reading, how are they interacting with groups, what are they searching for? Really building up that really accurate impression of your customers makes a huge difference at this stage. But really it comes down into what messaging you're sharing with them. And this is where storytelling really comes into its own. And actually, for those that like a bit of science, storytelling is proven to increase your oxytocin. Now, that is that hormone which makes people feel warm and fuzzy, and stories have that impact on you, even in the business world. And that oxytocin builds trust. And in fact, 88% of buyers only buy from companies they trust. So it's not hard to see that if your initial touch point is really focusing on them, their pain points, their needs, and then bringing it to life in a really compelling, creative way, you've got a far higher chance of success of making them actually think that you understand them. So invest in storytelling. It isn't marketing fluff. It is so important that you move away from that vanilla marketing now more than ever in a saturated space. You know, the formulaic content that appears is not going to cut the mustard. It's just not going to work. Don't overcomplicate. You know, something that makes sense to you, does it stack up if you showed it to somebody who didn't have a clue what you did? That's how simplistic it needs to be. It needs to cut through the noise, you know, avoid meaningless buzzwords, you know, and really speak plainly. You need to position your content in your audience's world, not get them to come into yours. And that is so important. So just to summarize this first section, so attract is really about attracting your buyers to you. And to attract them, you need to really give them something to make them want to read your content, make them want to take notice of you. Think about your messaging and then really think about what matters to them. And then make sure your strategy is really where they are. You may feel you're doing this, but really think about it. Think about the last bit of content or campaigns you sent out. And then if you're honest, how much of it was really focusing on you and how much of it was really focusing on their genuine pain points. Okay, so we've got their attention. Now what we need to do is keep it. And this is where a lot of companies fall down. They start off really well. They start to get excited, but then that momentum stops. And that is where your leads start to not quite happen, starts to fizzle. People start to get demotivated. But that's because people give up too soon. Now, for a long time, we spoke about the rule of 7. You had to reach people 7 times in order to get their attention. Believe it or not, that's actually changed. For those of you who are joining us who are targeting consumers, that's got a bit easier. Now people think that, you know, if it's a low value spend, an easy decision, you might only need to reach them 3 to 5 times with that core messaging. But for the B2B people on this webinar, it's got tougher. It's actually now closer to 8 to 12 plus touch points. That makes sense. It's a crowded space. People are bombarded every day with people wanting to sell to them. So you have to make it count. You have to put the effort in. Often I'll speak to customers who have a high value sale, but expect it to be easy. Someone's not going to part with tens and tens of thousands of pounds unless they feel you're the right partner. And to do that, you have to put the effort in. You know, 43% of consumers are more likely to engage with brands that engage them on multiple channels. That's, you know, nearly half of your audience. So that really being thinking about where they are and then how you're going to approach them 8 to 12 times if you're B2B, that takes a lot of thinking and a lot of strategy. It's not difficult, but it is being systematic and thinking about how you're going to really push people through that funnel to get in touch with you. But it's worth it. There's a 33% increase in revenue for businesses that prioritize that consistent branding. Now, think about your current sales and now increase it by a third. It's pretty attractive. So if we look at those tips for success, so if you think about this, you've got their attention, you're really understanding that it's not a quick fix. You really need to take your time to think about how you're going to push your customer base through this funnel. What are you going to leverage? Now, this is where you need to think about the digital arena. You know, it's crowded. So actually, have you got that really strong brand authority? Is your website going to surface in the search? And that's where it's really leveraging those SEO tools. And, you know, in some places, seeing if PPC is appropriate. For some brands, paid search can be extremely effective if it's aligned with a wider campaign. Often companies expect one strand. So we've got their attention. We've thought about how many times we need to reach them. Just to recap, as that was rather unfortunate, that freeze. For B2C, you've got to reach them at least 3 to 5 times, and for B2B, 8 to 12 times. So that's a lot of times to be hitting people, not hitting, sorry, to be reaching them. So that's where we've really got to think about that engaging across channels. But it's not enough just to engage. What you really need to think about is, what are you telling them? And this is where you've got to think about value. People are far less likely to part with budget unless you've invested in them, unless they've actually seen that you're willing to take that time to actually give some value back. And that's where it goes back into attract. That's where you really need to know what their pain points are and what their barriers are. And that's really bringing that consultative sales approach into marketing and really adding that value. And then think about that buyer journey. Where are they on that path? Do they need to have, a biggest pain point solved through a guide? Or do they need to really have that proof that you have the expertise to really help them and get the results that they need? So really, it's about drilling down into mapping out your customer and where they're going to be online and what messaging you're going to give them at each stage. So lastly, it's all about strategy. Now, for me, this is where I see a lot of businesses falling down. You might have some great campaigns, you may even be executing it, but without strategy, it won't be sustainable. Now, everything starts and ends with strategy. You start with a strategy on what you want to achieve, who you want to target, and how you're going to go about it. But it's not enough just to stop there. What you then need to do is really think about what's working, how are you going to push people through, and then evaluating. Now, 78% of businesses are not satisfied with their conversion rates. When you drill down into it, the reason why it won't be working is often linked to strategy. Assuming something works, assuming the messaging is right, assuming that you've approached them enough times. And actually, most of the time, businesses haven't. But it's worth it because nurtured leads produce 20% more sales opportunities. Again, think about your current lead generation and increase it by 20%. It's pretty powerful. So if we drill down into that strategy and look at how to make that a success, you can often see businesses where they've got some pretty exciting campaigns, it's non-chat GBT, pretty interesting. But then what they do is they then put a throwaway call to action on the end. That is a core part of your strategy. You need to really, really signpost what you want your prospects to do. And that goes back into thinking about where they are on that journey. Conversions happen when you make it easy for people to say yes. And part of that is removing roadblocks, really making your calls to action simple, obvious, and don't make people guess what to do next. If you're selling a technology solution, don't go straight in for the kill and ask them to do a demo. You need to warm them up to it, and that needs to come further down the line once you've given them that real insight. If it's a consumer, you need to probably show that you've got good reviews, that it works, it's worth the investment. You need to remove those roadblocks and make it easy so that when people have evaluated, it's easy to say yes and to purchase or to get in touch for more information. And this is where nurturing those leads become really effective. And obviously we can drill down into this in the Q&A at the end, dependent on whether you're B2C or B2B, because it is a bit different. But from a B2B perspective, that's where you really need to think about your flow of how you're marketing to your prospects, looking at your email sequences, and then making sure you're outreaching to people that have interacted, looking at what they're reading, and then making sure that you've got a next piece of content to keep them interested. It's really about thinking about them as working through this funnel and then not getting distracted. This needs to be consistent activity that you consistently commit to doing, and that's how it becomes sustainable. And really, it's about testing and tweaking. This part is really important. It can be tough being told what you're doing isn't good enough. No one wants to hear that, but sometimes you have to accept that what you've done isn't working, and that's where you then need to reevaluate. You need to look at your messaging, you need to look at how you're executing it, and you need to start to look at what is working, and then you need to amplify it. And the amplification is really important, as is holding your hands up and saying when something isn't working. But don't quit too soon. Sometimes you might have the right mechanism, but you need to remove the barriers. You need to try different things, different approaches, and then you find a mechanism that really works. And I'd say that's probably one of the biggest barriers for successful, sustainable pipelines is being too quick to quit. People expect it to be very, very easy, but actually this takes a long-term commitment to sustainable growth, to really building those pipelines. And that's where the most successful businesses really shine, because it's a long-term strategy. I often say to people, split your marketing into two. You've got your brand building, which is longevity, and you've got your lead generation. What a lot of businesses do is start ramping up their marketing when they're feeling a bit nervous. Pipelines aren't quite where they need to be, the pressures are mounting, sales aren't converting where they need to be. Then they start to get thinking it's leads. that short-term approach is rarely successful. You need to think about the 95% rule. 95% of people are at the start of their journey and only 5% are ready to buy. If you're just focusing on that 5%, you're going to keep almost, having to keep topping up that bucket. It becomes harder and harder and harder. So that strategy is really going to keep you focused on that long-term view while making sure you're getting those conversions in the here and now. Now, aside from my technical hitch, not what you want, I assure you, I hope that's given you a really good overview into those 3 core strands of attracting and really getting the attention of the people you really want to speak to, and then personalizing it to make it really relevant. Thinking about those really good storytelling types of initiatives that really make people feel connected to your brand. And then you've thought about building, right, it's not a one-hit wonder, it's a real process to get them through this funnel with different pieces of content, really adding that value to them to make it easy for them to say yes. And all throughout that is your strategy, really pushing that along, making it happen, helping you evaluate what works, what doesn't. So I hope that was a good summary, despite the interference. And now I'm going to pass you over to the fabulous Fiona, who's going to give you an insight into this in action. Over to you, Fiona.
Thanks so much, Jenny. Great to see you again. And thanks to everyone for joining today. So just to give you a little bit of context, I led LiveTiles, a global SaaS employee experience organization, over the last year on global marketing, to an acquisition very recently over the last couple of months. Prior to this, we had a lot of challenges before I joined the role on areas that really were not delivering on leads. And the brand side equally was just really not appearing through our digital channels. So this really was holding us back on the digital side. The investment really was not translating into tangible results, and there was a big gap in lead generation. The SEO was falling short. Our existing SEO and all of our digital efforts were not producing the traffic that we needed. Neither were we converting on visitors into leads, and many missed opportunities in the marketplace were just, not helping our sales teams globally. So this disjointed digital strategy without the cohesive approach, we were lacking focus, and our campaigns were failing to get consistent demo inquiries. I was in touch with a couple of agencies, one of which was Nutcracker. We started working together about 8 months ago on a campaign whereby we had targeted SEO and content strategy. Like Jenny said, the storytelling was really important for us to capture the high intent keywords and optimizing content for our clients and prospects. So we achieved in a very short period of time over 1,300 form submissions through organic search alone. The quality is very important over quantity, and this organic search accounted for over 23% of all of our form submissions, which was excellent, highlighting again the importance of driving this quality traffic to boost conversions. This transformed then in our organic traffic, whereby we improved overall user experience, and the content relevance was driving an excellent 67% increase in our sessions, making the organic search top performing for high quality leads that were incoming. Just to give you an example, the global sales team of which was led by our director of sales in our New York City office, we managed to land a 6-figure SQL sales lead from the back of these campaigns, which is testament to the work and the improvements on these campaigns. So here you will see on this slide just some of the excellent offline and online content that was produced. So we had corporate brochures, mobile app campaigns, digital advertising. Some of this content we used at a Gartner digital workplace event in London a couple of months ago. It really turned a corner in terms of targeted content. So that is definitely testament to Jenny and your team there. So I will now hand it back to you. Thank you.
And obviously your fabulous leadership, Fiona.
Thank you.
So this is something that we have called nx3. It's really drilling down onto these 3 strands and really thinking about strategy meeting creative content and underpins by lead generation. It's easy to ignore one of those strands, but that is truly where you're going to build a sustainable pipeline. It is about securing market share, really importantly, building that brand authority and ultimately achieving those measurable results. So I'm going to stop sharing now and open up the floor to any questions, which I hope there are, especially after my freeze. So please feel free to either put your hands in the air or to pop it in the chat. We would love to have some questions. And if not, I'd have got a couple of familiar faces here and I will be picking on you. So I suggest a question is had. Thank you, Maya. How do you know reaching the right people? So really that is about making sure that you're really understanding your customer base. So again, really thinking about not just the sector, but the job title, the seniority, the influencers, and then seeing if they're engaging. So we often say at Nutcracker, you know, some metrics are vanity. There's little point celebrating success if you're targeting CTOs or electricians, but you're getting results from pig farmers. You know, so you really need to make sure that the people that are responding to your campaigns are really the ones that you want to speak to. Thank you very much. Another question coming through, which is great. Yes, thank you, Elliot. That is where you go back into your strategy. So that's about making sure you're managing your data effectively. So really thinking about those opens and clicks and unsubscribes or looking at your social media channels. General rule of thumb is, you know, don't fatigue, but that's where you've got to find something interesting and really look at how you're reading that data. So if, for example, somebody's particularly interested in this one piece of content, then you want to take them on that journey. You don't just want them to send them off in another direction because you've got that next bit of content ready. So you'll start to see it in your results, and it's about frequency. You know, you want to start appearing, you know, once or twice a week in people's feeds, but no more than that. You don't want to bombard them more than once or twice a week with one particular email campaign before you push them on to the next. So it goes back into that strategy and really mapping out how you're going to reach them and the touch points. I hope that answers your question, Elliot. If it doesn't, please put me on the spot. I'm one of these weird people that enjoy that. I don't enjoy frozen screens though, so not that bit. Okay, thank you. So hello, Imran. I'm so happy you could join us. And of course, Elliot and Maya, I was happy you could too. How do we make sure that the investment is translating into tangible? Yeah. Okay, great question. Thank you, Imran. So this is where it's really about joining up your sales and marketing efforts and really drilling down into your and your dashboard. So what you really want to be having to capture your metrics is having your marketing qualified leads, your sales accepted leads, your sales qualified leads, and then your close, and that's what you want to be looking at all the time. So no good, and also by monitoring those particular statistics, you'll start to see where the holes are. So if, for example, you've got sky high marketing qualified leads but they're not converting into sales accepted leads, then you know that actually the marketing qualified leads are probably not the right caliber, or your salesperson is not the right person to get that discussion moving along into the sales side. So, and that the same applies true if you're trying to convert from sales accepted leads to sales qualified leads. If there's a disconnect there, either the salesperson isn't asking the right questions or isn't really bringing your proposition to life, or the lead wasn't strong enough. So that's where you really, really test that. And then, of course, once they're closed, you can start to track measurables. Now, marketing does become a little bit murky, Imran, which is why I'm sure that question came up. And that's when you really, it can sometimes be hard to measure what was marketing influenced and what was marketing led. And that's where it's about really thinking about that really rich brand building. And you do start to see it. You know, we've had lots of clients that say to us, you know, gosh, we've heard from lots of our client base, they're really noticing us, they're seeing us. And then those accounts just become that much more buoyant. So it's really about being vigilant and monitoring, you know, all aspects of what you're doing. Imran, I hope that answered your question. Thank you very much. Hi, Abby. Thank you for your question. How long should you choose your chosen run before you decide to change tactics? So a lot of companies will put all this effort into building these campaigns and then get bored very quickly. And certainly at Nutcracker, we've been under pressure to do that ourselves. This, you know, real relentless need to have something new. If it's a difficult proposition, then I would say you need to really have a 3-month campaign running to really build that real connection. Think about how you're going to keep pushing them through the funnel and really spark their interest. And that's where strategy comes in. That's where through that campaign you need to be measuring what's working, what they're reacting to, and then tailor what you're doing. Marketing isn't a straight line. It goes off in different tangents, and actually that's where you need to be able to respond and react to keep it feeling fresh. And you'll get a sense of it, you know, when you get under the skin of these things, you'll start to feel like it's becoming a bit boring, mainly because you'll get bored of doing it, and then you'll think, no, I need something fresh to get out there. But also you'll start to see it in engagement and the stats. Your stats are one of your biggest weapons. Really help you, you know, see the fatigue, the interest, and that's where analysing that data is critical. Hope that answers your question, Abby. Thank you. Elliot, thank you very much. How would you convince ownership of investing, rebranding versus short-term marketing for lead generation to your point around? Okay, thank you, Elliot. So when we're looking at the investment of brands versus short-term marketing, there's lots and lots of stats that can back that up if you're putting that case forward to someone who owns the budget. And really what they're doing at the moment will probably reinforce that. The businesses that really invest in the long term are the ones that aren't panicking because they've built that brand, and you can measure it through things like measuring key share of voice. So thinking about what particular metrics are important to you or phrases, and then really looking at how much share of voice you're getting and getting more of it. But in terms of convincing people, it's about the opportunity and about really showcasing how much, you know, marketing has changed. Gone are the days where, you know, you could you know, just do a couple of things and you get some leads. You need to put the effort in, and without putting the effort in and really thinking about that brand, marketing can very quickly become boring, can become vanilla, and can be forgettable. So really it's about that brand building, that storytelling, those campaigns that keep it exciting. Did that answer your question, Elliot? I hope it did.
It does, yeah, thank you.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Well, look, despite my technical hitch, it was an ambitious goal to try and help you, give you the tools you need in 30 minutes. I hope that's been useful. It's a whistle-stop overview, but hopefully gives you that insight into really thinking about those 3 core strands, you know, that attraction, and really think about what you're doing within your businesses and how you're truly attracting people. Then really thinking about how you're then keeping their attention and pushing them through to action, and then really thinking honestly about your strategy. You know, sometimes it can be really difficult to be honest about what we're doing and honest about what isn't working, but it's that honesty that's going to get you those results and get you that growth. So I do hope everybody has found it useful and it's been a good use of time. Thank you to those that have joined, and certainly thank you to the familiar faces. Thank you, Celeste, for that thumbs up. Appreciate that. And I hope to see you all again soon, and it'd be great to get some feedback on the success or whether it's been useful for you. So thank you very, very much for joining, and I hope you all have fantastic rest of your afternoons. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.